Hi, everyone. Welcome to AR and VR in Healthcare, a webinar hosted by the Corporate Partners Program. I'm Chelsea Lowe. I'm the Program Coordinator for the Corporate Partners Program, and I'm very excited to have one of our partners, BrickSimple, here today to talk about AR and VR. Det, thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started with the presentation, a few housekeeping. This meeting is being recorded, just so you are aware, and all participants should be muted. We'll have time for Q&A following the presentation, and you can submit any Q&A questions through the chat feature. And before Det gets started, we wanted to talk a little bit about the Corporate Partners Program. So the Corporate Partners Program is a program that connects students to our partners. So they are corporations, nonprofits, and startups here at CCI. And the goals are around development, retention, and recruitment of top tech talent. We do this through different events. They can range from career networking events to guest lectures or tech talks like we have here today. And we're really excited to have Det Ansinn, the CEO and founder of BrickSimple, present on AR and VR in healthcare. So Det, I'll pass it over to you.
That's terrific. I guess I will share my screen here. Just a moment. First, let's get this here. All right. There we go. Everything up there on the screen, Chelsea?
Yes, you're good.
So thank you. Thank you, Chelsea, for the introduction, and thank you for the Drexel University College of Computing Informatics Corporate Partners Program for having me today. I'm a product of Drexel University myself. I graduated electrical computer engineering in 1995. I'm proudly wearing a Drexel sweatshirt at the moment. I wanted to take the opportunity today to share with you some things that we've been doing as a company in AR and VR, augmented reality, virtual reality, specifically in healthcare. And these are technologies that really get people excited. People are excited about these new paradigms with regards to how you interact with technology, how you can interact with virtual worlds, and especially in circumstances like we're experiencing right now, stay at home, understanding ways that these technologies are being put to use in practice that can be hugely beneficial, one, in delivery of healthcare, but also in terms of how we can use these experiences to extend our world when our world may be a little more confined than usual. And I want to start out with this presentation discussion, really thinking about something large. And by large, I mean really large. This here on screen you see is a Proton Therapy machine. It's used in cancer treatment specifically. This is at Penn Medicine, just a few blocks away from the Drexel campus. These buildings that have these massive proton therapy machines, these facilities cost tens of millions of dollars. The machine itself extends within the whole building. You see the small aperture opening. They're huge, and they're also running nonstop treating cancer patients. So the challenge with something like this is if you want to train someone on the use of this machine, what this environment is like, how patients move through that environment. If you really want to understand it, you need some way to take folks through it without disrupting the operation of the machine. So working with Penn Medicine, we created a virtual reality experience that takes that machine, that takes all of those elements from the office areas to the greeting areas, that simulates that facility within virtual reality and this high fidelity VR experience. This is something where they can take the various aspects of the machine operation. They can understand how this works with the patient workflow, and it is a reproduction of the actual facility done in VR. So someone who goes through this training experience can do this training, have this experience, and when they walk in the facility, everything's familiar to them. And when you have that kind of context and you have that content to be able to understand that, you get this great level of awareness. Things are familiar to you. You have this spatial awareness, And VR is extraordinarily effective with this. In fact, there have been studies done that have demonstrated a 70% greater retention of skills and knowledge using virtual reality and using these pieces versus classroom or video training. And in fact, the Stanford and the University of Denmark had done that study that demonstrated that stickiness. Is something that we've also seen pop up in other studies to have that impact. Of course, it's not just these facilities that cost tens of millions of dollars to build and erect, where it require this kind of level of simulation. It also comes down to those who are, providing healthcare. That those healthcare practitioners, particularly nurses who are on the front lines, that can benefit from tools like these. We do a lot of work with in healthcare in VR, industrial manufacturing in VR. But in healthcare, we see this great opportunity, especially when we're talking in terms of nurses and other practitioners, where the kind of scale and impact that this technology can have can be huge. So here right now we see, actually it's Ethan Colts, one of our employees, also a Drexel grad. He's working with a nurse and taking them through an experience that we created working with the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, again, just a few blocks from Drexel's campus. And this experience was designed to do is take nurses through the room layout, the standard practices of the hospital, so that they understand that. So as they're being onboarded within the Children's Hospital experience, they have an understanding of these CHOP practices. And what's also interesting when you think about virtual reality, you think about augmented reality, these wearables, it allows you to track and collect information to understand where they're spending time, where they're frustrated, what pieces are working and not working when they're going through their work experience. And that's hugely valuable because that can impact how practices are changed. It can also impact an understanding of how that information is making it to them. Are they really understanding and having the right takeaways from these experiences? And doing it through an experience like this particular experience versus the Proton Therapy machine. This experience is scaled and designed to even run on devices like the Oculus Quest. So it has a high fidelity experience as possible to be delivered on those previously mobile, detached class of devices. Of course, in healthcare, surgeons, doctors, nurses, and other practitioners are only part of the equation. The patient is really essential to all of this. And we've been involved in the creation of experiences that are designed to give those who are providing that care a much better understanding of what the patient is going through. We've done experiences also to help patients themselves understand that patient journey and communicate that. And this example application here, this is one of our folks wearing an HTC Vive. If we hop in here, this experience basically puts them in a day of a life of someone who's experiencing hyperphosphatation. And this particular disease can affect, how you feel, the energy you feel, the strength you feel. And what we do is we have an experience that takes them through aspects of what it's like to experience that disease. And you see here, the person has a milk carton that they've picked up. It has tracking devices on it. We've got these gloves that are weighted. The person who's going through this experience has a weighted vest, weighted anklets. So they feel the weight of what happens in the world of someone who has this experiencing this disease. But also, even tactile elements like picking up this carton of milk or creamer, that carton is weighted. So when they go and pick it up, they feel how difficult it is to do even these basic tasks. And creating that kind of empathy to really communicate what a disease does to someone can be a profoundly impactful experience that you can't do through watching a video. You can't necessarily sit in a classroom and understand. It takes you into the understanding experience. And we have done everything in this from, weighted physical objects to understanding, degradation of vision and communicating that in a simulated fashion. But even there are some effects of these diseases and drugs that you wouldn't think are easy to reproduce. And one example of that is slurred speech. How do you have someone experience slurred speech? What we do is we actually play feedback with about 100 millisecond delay of a person's own voice, and that can result and causes them to slur their speech. So using all of these things, using all of these different tools, you can really take someone through the experience of having a disease and leveraging all these aspects, both physical real world aspects, as well as those unusual digital simulation aspects of vision, as well as hearing and speech. And we've been working with physical objects in virtual worlds for a while because I strongly feel that that physical tactility, uh, that tactile nature of these things is much better than some kind of vibration or whatnot. To actually feel something's important. And in some use cases, it's hugely important. We've done a lot of work in virtual reality, back to the original Oculus dev kits, to also work in augmented mixed reality with devices like the HoloLens. And using the HoloLens, we've actually incorporated in the experience the use of mannequins. And these mannequins, in this case, a mannequin made by Wearable, we use that mannequin for a CPR training experience, this example, where the person can apply pressure, get feedback, understand what's going on. This experience won a few different awards because it's allowing you to see what's happening in the body and to see what's happening while you're performing CPR. And it takes data from that mannequin, from the sensors in that mannequin, to provide and animate that experience. And CPR is one where you can't work with vibrations or whatnot. To perform it, do it right, you really need that tactile experience. And we did this work. This particular experience was used for a published study. We worked with Marion Leary and the Center for Resuscitation Science at Penn Medicine. Now, Marion Leary is now at the nursing school heading up innovation. And these kinds of collaborations to really create something that's effective and impactful is hugely important. It's not just about using these things for these physical experiences for things that you touch. It's also opportunities to really communicate what's happening and experience what's happening with the patient. So this is an experience we've created for CHOP that's currently being used for a study to help nursing personnel understand how to address sepsis. And when you have a patient that's in septic shock, the practice is carefully administering small amounts of fluid into the patient so that we can help address their shock and care for the patient. In this case, you see a syringe there. And you see in the mannequin, we actually illustrate what's happening as the fluid is given to the patient through the syringe. And what we do is we then animate what's happening to their circulatory system as the fluid enters their system. Now, to make all of this work, what we had done is we used a flow meter, the same flow meter that is utilized in Keurig coffee machines, to be able to measure the amount of fluid going in and provide an appropriate animation of what's happening. So when you think about these things, this solution includes an embedded Arduino device that has this flow meter. It incorporates a HoloLens, incorporates all these elements, and we even incorporate deep learning into these solutions to bring all these things together. So there's so many disciplines that come together, from that 3D model to the system to tie in the IoT elements, to bring this in augmented reality and mixed reality. All those elements have to work together to make it function. So I promised that we're going to go smaller and smaller scale. And this machine that you see in front of you is a surgical microscope. Surgical microscopes weigh about 700 pounds, particular pictures, military use of a surgical microscope. These devices are invaluable, but they're also very difficult to get to remote locations. They're very difficult to get to a battlefield. They're also extraordinarily expensive, and they're fragile. So institutions tend to have multiple of these microscopes on standby to treat patients. So we started working and with a company that was started by Godfrey Nazareth, who's also a Drexel graduate. Godfrey had a vision for how do we take this and make this something that is digital. So we're with Godfrey Nazareth and his company X Biomedical to develop a fully digital equivalent of what that surgical microscope does. And you see here, you see 2 cameras mounted on this stand. This is one of the ugly working prototypes, as Godfrey likes to refer to them, that takes digital video from the stereoscopic 3D digital video, takes that and delivers that to the smart glass device so that you're able to go and see a magnified view of the surgical site with all that without that massive machine, and something in the end that's small and that can fit in basically a carry-on piece of luggage. So this solution, this is an earlier version of this ugly working prototype. This solution, we've been going through iterations to improve the performance, shrink down the size. What you see here on the table, if you look to the right, that NVIDIA Xavier computer, along with the cameras there, that now constitutes the current state and size of this device and miniaturization. And we're using the NVIDIA Xavier hardware because the solution incorporates deep learning and AI for everything from voice control to also image enhancement to provide further information and details. And with the shrinking of this solution, what this has allowed us to do also is the shrinking solution is that the goal is to have the same platform replace loops, which you see on the left, which are fixed magnification on glasses used by surgeons, to have that replaced with a fully digital solution. Of course, here's another ugly working prototype with co-founder of X Biomedical, Matt Weltese, taking all those elements, bring that together. We have been working as BrickSimple with wearable computing in healthcare for a while. Not just this type of use case, but other use cases in terms of the continuum of care. And that work has led us to create, we're currently working with a company in Boston that's in stealth mode, to create a solution that supports the whole inventory and management of surgical tools and instruments. And specifically what we're doing here, and you're seeing here something through Microsoft HoloLens, is that we are using AI deep learning to identify the instruments that are used, the instruments that have been used during a surgery, making sure they all made it back out of the patient, and also identifying instruments that have been properly sterilized or instruments that will require sterilization, to provide this as very key asset tracking to prevent reinfection, to prevent the kinds of issues with these instruments potentially left in patients. So taking all these different elements, once we have wearable computing and able to do that, we can tie all these things together and really do things that were considered otherwise incredible or not even possible just a few years ago. And in that regard, we've talked about wearable augmented reality, we've talked about mixed reality, but in that regard, this is not just about technology that you wear at this point. We also work with volumetric 3D displays, and this technology that folks aren't readily aware is available out there. And here's a little video clip of one of the experiences that we created. This experience allows a doctor to educate their patient, or a nurse to educate the patient on a particular procedure. And it uses this holographic display along with hand tracking that you can communicate that in the conditions and basically the action of a surgery with the patient. And it's not quite at that, as you see that little stock video clip of people doing those things in space, but being able to work with these technologies brings a huge opportunity to, deliver a whole different caliber of experience in the real world and the kinds of things that we not too long ago considered science fiction. So I want to thank you all for the opportunity to share some of these things. My contact information is here if you have any questions. I just want to hand it back over to Chelsea here for the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Det. So yes, now we can do Q&A. So if you have any questions, please submit them into the chat. So I'll give you all a few minutes to think through questions, but while you're thinking that through, Det, I did want to say congrats on your new office.
Oh, thank you.
Really impressive that you were able to move somewhat with everything that's going on right now, but was just curious what prompted you to move to University City.
We've had an office in Philadelphia for a couple of years, and we were in Center City, Philadelphia originally. But what we found is that really, for the kinds of cutting edge work that we do, and from the kinds of folks who work with, I mentioned Chop and Penn and our involvement with Drexel, we really felt that as a team, University City was where it was at. I mean, we know also from, we are all fill the cycle, but we do co-ops and interns and have those things going. It made all sense in the world for us to be there, but there's really so much innovation happening. We're at the corner of 34th and Market, which is an intersection of Drexel, the Science Center, and Penn. And it is really where the action is happening in Philadelphia. I mean, this is really something we have a lot of pride in, certainly as Drexel and these other institutions. A lot of pride that this is where innovation in Philadelphia is happening. And we wanted to be right in the heart of it. And I had gotten word that this nice size space had become available at 34th and Market. We hopped at the opportunity. Of course, the stay-at-home orders went into effect, and right now, our office includes a bunch of bins and boxes, but we know that life will be back to normal soon, and I'm just really excited about that. And for me, being someone who graduated from Drexel, I paid it my own way through school. The co-op program is how I paid for my tuition. I came from nothing. By skin of my teeth, how do I make way through this? And we've been very fortunate in my ventures at BrickSimple that also for me, it's just so important that, you give back to the places that had such a huge impact on you. And for us, it's really exciting, and our team could not be more excited about being a part of the University City community.
Great. Well, thank you so much. We definitely appreciate all your support. We do have a few questions. The first one is, what are the regulatory hurdles and timelines for getting these technologies mainstreamed?
For some of the regulatory pieces, when you're talking about research, I mentioned a lot of research and study work being done. There are different levels and requirements for that. And for training, it fits in the same category as other types of training. We have been involved with medical devices that also incorporate these technologies, and those timelines, sadly, are, you're talking multi-year exercises. But right now, we see the training is an area where the hurdles are a little lower. They still have to be, you have medically accurate animation requirements. You have these pieces that come into play. But we really do see those opportunities there. Once you get things that are into clinical practice and diagnosis, which would involve that as well, it does take longer. I do think that the FDA software as a medical device is something that has opened some doors and evolved into some technologies that are on that regulatory path. But it is something in this space. When you're working in healthcare, you can't wing it. It requires you to really, have lots of consideration in these various requirements.
The next one is, how do you decide whether to use CGI versus live stream capture? Does CGI provide as much immersion and believability as a live 360 3D camera capture?
We actually learned pretty early on, humans are still hard. I mean, we can make that proton therapy facility look, as it does in real life. We've got great lighting guys. We've got folks on the team who've done movie effects work. We have that part down. Humans continue to be hard, but we have found, and this is supported by studies, that the desire to try to make the humans photorealistic drifts into uncanny valley, et cetera, that the believability of these scenarios is most often driven by space and volume. So early on, we were doing a lot of 3D, 360 camera work. We worked with all the various, rigs and whatnot, these big, huge things you had to have special cooling to manage. And those experiences, your believability fades very quickly when you realize you can't move around the space. Almost everything we do at this point is our room scale experiences. And to make those experiences credible, you have to be able to walk around and see things from different angles. And to have that in there. And I think that, we basically stepped away from doing any of the 360 photography and video because we've seen it in the results from the studies that have been done, studies I've been part of, and also the Caliber experience, that you can have someone, if they believe and take in the actual scale, it has such a huge impact. So I would think the future of the space, especially as things get more powerful, we're also with the real-time ray tracing, which folks are familiar with from maybe familiar with the gaming. Those things are really going to up the fidelity of the CGI-driven experiences.
Next question, how do you see your business changing, especially given your experience in healthcare after the pandemic, if at all?
Everything is changing. And I know for folks who, if you weren't in the professional world back in 2008, see kind of the impact there, a lot will change with our world here. A lot will change, and how things are done and what social distancing means. I think one area that's being impacted by this is location-based entertainment, that someone may not be willing to put on a random VR headset that was worn by several hundred people before them. I think you'll see some changes there. We have clients in healthcare. We do a lot of work with clients in Boston and Philadelphia on the healthcare side. It's about a third of our business. We're actually doing brand new VR and AR work in those spaces because of the importance of the distancing, because of the importance of the training and having these interactions. We're seeing continuous demand for that right now. There may be other economic factors that cause that to drift, but one of the things that I've learned in the 18 years of BrickSimple is that you have this constant evolution of what's happening in the marketplace, and it's always important to be going where it's going versus staying with where you're comfortable in and where it's been.
Great. And then there was another question around how far or how practical VR is when it comes to the use of its use when it still requires touch, such as administering injections or getting a feel for anatomical structures. Yep.
I think in the raw education examples like anatomy, and I've friends with their companies offering products in the space. It's there, the challenge is of course content creation. I mean, there still does not exist something. Doing things in 3D models are hard, and creating things that are correct is really difficult in that space. I think that production requirement that even some of the most established organizations that provide educational content in healthcare are struggling with this because it's orders of magnitude greater than the printed text and printed word. And we're dealing with this in academia. It took a long time for those folks to embrace ebooks and to take the same content to this level is a different world. I do think that there's huge opportunities for it. I know Case Western also is one of the institutions that's making use of that. I do think that VR for some of these trainings can be very practical, particularly when mixed in with physical objects. One of the areas where the hype curve doesn't quite match up is when folks talk about injection and locating on a patient. You see a lot of hype that for a patient, I want to locate this particular aspect of this level of fidelity. We've done a bit of work in that space in terms of that very high precision tracking. You're not going to do it with any of the built-in tracking that exists within an off-the-shelf Magic Leap or HoloLens or HTC device. They are not that precise. And it's one thing when you talk, Microsoft's HoloLens can do sub-centimeter accuracy. Sub-centimeter when you're cutting into a living being is the difference between life and death. And that continues to be a challenge. And I think it's going to be a little ways before we're able to use it for that kind of use. Now, one area where we see great potential is when you mix in existing imaging. There's certain procedures that are done where you may be running a catheter-like device or a device that is within a patient where they do an MRI or other types of imaging. They do an image, see the location of that particular device, move it a little bit, do that location again, be able to superimpose that on a patient, understand that context can be valuable. But again, it's mixing that type of technology and medical imaging with the actual practice.
Well, Det, I know we're coming up on time. I want to thank you again for sharing all of your knowledge and expertise with us. And before we end, I did want to share a few upcoming events that we have for our corporate partners program for the rest of the month. So our next event is going to be on the 23rd. We have a new corporate partner, Quantum Games. They're an early stage esports startup, so we're going to do a Q&A with them. And then our other partner, Vanguard, is hosting a webinar on tips and techniques for mastering the virtual interview, which is very timely right now. And I wanted to thank all of you. Det, thank you again. Thanks
so much. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you all for participating and sharing your questions. I know we couldn't get to all of them, but Michelle, let me unmute you.
Bye, Det.
Hey, thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.